Hi, everybody. This is part two of the Be and Become interview that I am conducting with Mr. Gideon Shalwick. Now, in order to access the first three questions that we asked, right, for this particular interview, I will put a link in the description to look at the first interview. Just a quick reminder for both our listeners as well as our viewers on the channel. This project is about cultivating compassion between people. The reason for that is, usually we blame the people on the other side of the street, saying that it's their responsibility to change things, to change the world, to change the system. But if those exact same people point then to us, then we become them and we are them. So, in essence, every time we do this, we really have to become aware that there's three fingers pointing straight back to us. We are them. So, if we want to understand and change anything, it will have to start with us. Now, that's my bit of the introduction done. Gideon, welcome.
Welcome. Great to be here again.
Great to have you again. Just for our viewers and our listeners, can you give us a very quick, brief introduction again about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, way back, about 43 years ago in South Africa, I was born in Cape Town. When I was 16, we immigrated to New Zealand. We lived in New Zealand for about 13 years. And around about that time, the 13th year, while we were in New Zealand, I got a little bit ants in my pants. I've always had ants in my pants, but I got a few more back then, and I wanted to just change a few things up. So I decided to quit my job, me and my wife, emigrate to Australia, and start a new business, new life. And that was about 14 years ago now, and been the best decision I've ever made. Started, with writing a book and selling it. That's my first product. Did all right, but I didn't really know anything about online business, and everything was done online back then for me. And decided to go on this big journey to discover how business works, especially online business. Figured it out about 2.5 years later. Had a really successful launch with a friend of mine. Did very well compared to what I was doing. I was earning zero before then, and we launched and we did pretty well. And that was like the ticket for me, to sort of decide whether I want to continue with this entrepreneur thing. And since then, I've been able to set up multiple different businesses. Currently, I'm working on a company that I started actually in 2012. Had a bit of a break and then came back to it about 2 years ago. And we relaunched it as a video production service that helps get your videos ready for social media. It's called Splashio, splashio.com. You can check it out here on the site right now. And really, it's just we want to remove all the pain of video production for you, specifically for social media videos. So if you're interested in that, check it out, splashio.com. But that's what I'm busy with at the moment. And it's kind of an extension of who I am as a person. I think we talked about this a little bit last time, if I remember right. But it really is an extension of who I am, which is about, relatively recently I discovered something about myself that was really interesting, especially in the context of this discussion. And it was a subconscious drive that I was unaware of. And the drive for me was for significance and worthiness. And when I discovered that, it all of a sudden became conscious. And then I thought, hey, hang on, I can keep on trying to do this for myself, or now I can decide to start doing it for other people. Because it's one of those things that, when you pursue it, you can never get it. It's almost like trying to getting money or pursuing money. You can never get enough of it. It's the same, I think, when you try and pursue something like that, significance, or one of those unconscious drivers. You keep on trying to search for it and trying to find it, and you never quite get it until you figure out that you're actually supposed to be giving it away. Anyway, that's what the realization that came to me. And then, Splashio sort of started merging with that new discovery, and now we're all about helping others, find their own significance, their own worth, and sharing their message to the world through social video. So that's kind of the story of Splashio as well as me, but it's the same story. Splashio really is kind of like an extension or outcome of who I am as a person right now.
I hear you loud and clear. Now, just quickly before I jump into it, we had a bit of interference, a bit of static there a couple of seconds ago. I just want to make sure that, did you notice anything on your side, or was it on my side?
I did not notice anything. It should be fine on my side, I think, because we're
Because
recording
you're
on my
doing the
side. So it should
recording, exactly.
yeah, it should be fine.
Okay, perfect. Then it was on my side.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
You certainly are very clear and eloquent with your vocal transmission.
I've had a few practice runs.
I hear you. Goodness. That's it. Practice, practice, practice. Try again. This is exactly what this project is about. Okay. It's about talking to the people that have been around the block, quite literally. These are questions that are designed to cultivate, to give us clarity. These are questions that have been asked since probably the bloody beginning of time. All right. Things asked by the Indian Vedas when those were written, things asked by the old philosophers, Socrates and Plato. Now, today, things asked by us. But the more perspective we can get, the greater clarity we can also achieve. So, taking that into consideration, I shall jump off with, yet again, the first question. Gideon Shalwick, according to yourself, sir, what does it mean to let go?
Yeah, these are deep questions. And it's a great question because it's quite relevant for me, because it's been something that's actually been on my mind, especially for the last 2 years, maybe 3. Let's make that 4 years.
Wow.
4 years, there was an incident that happened to me that I couldn't let go of. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I finally figured out how to let it go. What happened, actually it was more than 4 years ago, maybe about around the same time. But anyway, what happened was someone decided to target me online, essentially a troll, but this particular troll was very mean, very smart, and very vocal and public about their trolling. So I won't go into the details, but what happened was I started creating an obsession about this in my own mind. And it really bothered me, daily, day to day to day, it bothered me. And I couldn't get rid of it. It's almost like there was this virus stuck in my head. And every time there'd be a little trigger, it would bring up that image of that person and those negative feelings towards myself and towards the person and towards the whole situation. And it made me really unhappy. And, I historically, what I would do when things like that would happen, when something bad would happen to me, was I would, and it would work pretty well up to a certain point, I would push it away and create layer upon layer upon layer on it, essentially burying it. So the more layers I would put on top, and the more I would, I'm not sure push it away is the right word, but it's almost like ignore, maybe perhaps wiping under the carpet would be an expression. Whatever we want to call it, I would try and distance myself
Put it
from
in
that
that
memory.
box, that box underneath your bed where the label is, "I'll deal with you later."
Yeah, or the thinking would be, I never want to think about this again, because every time I think about it, it just bothers me. But the idea was to get rid of that pain, right? Because I didn't know how to get rid of it. Like nothing that I would do would get rid of it. Until I read an amazing book. Now, I can't remember the name of the book, but I actually came to the realization just before, but the book clarified it for me, and I wish I could remember the name of the book. I think it's the same guy who wrote Power versus Force, that guy. I can't remember his name either. But he had another book where he talked about this whole process of, acceptance and forgiveness and this sort of thing. Now, he didn't talk about this next thing, but I discovered this for myself.
Hi, my name is Marcel. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. These interviews are parts of a whole series. So if you would like to continue to watch these, Don't forget to subscribe and click on the little bell to get the notifications. I hope you enjoy this. Take care.
Where part of the process of forgiveness is, maybe before that even, is acceptance of the situation that's happened. But
Yeah.
what I discovered was, before you could even accept something, you need to acknowledge it or recognize it. And it's in I mean, I'm not sure if you still understand Afrikaans, but in my mother tongue, Afrikaans, the word is erken or herken. When it's like the acknowledge. It's like giving someone who's won a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that. You give them acknowledgement, right? So it's almost like putting them up on a pedestal. You're saying, wow, that, I acknowledge that you're there. I acknowledge that you exist, and I acknowledge that you've done something great. So in effect, what you're doing is you're humbling yourself to that person in a way, because you're putting them on a pedestal, so to speak. So that kind of, I'm talking about that kind of acknowledgement, whether it's a good thing to do or not in a person's case like that, that's a different discussion. But I'm just talking here about acknowledging those negative energies inside your mind. And then, because once you've acknowledged it in that sense of recognition, giving it recognition, it essentially means you have to let go of your own ego. Because the only way you can acknowledge it and say, hey, you're greater than me, is to say that my ego is not that great. My ego is not that important. And it's really counterintuitive, because you think, no, I'm better off fighting this thing and crushing it. Whereas this is kind of the opposite, where you're saying, no, I'm acknowledging it. I'm acknowledging it in a way so that it opens up the door for acceptance. And then once you start accepting it, that opens up the door for forgiveness. And it was incredible, because it was a matter of 1 or 2 days that I started doing this, that negative energy started disappearing completely. So I was struggling with it for 2 or 3 years. It was like a really, thing, I can't get rid of it type of thing. And every single day I would think about it, that negative energy and that negative event. And then as soon as I did the recognition thing and then acceptance and forgiveness, boom, it all dissipated. It all dissipated. So that allowed me then, in a sense, to let go of it finally. And so that was really useful. And I'm not an expert in these things. I'm just sharing. This is what worked for me in that particular case, and was very, very useful.
But it's extremely applicable, because letting go in its essence is letting go of something. All right. So the best way I ever came across explaining it is, when you let go of something, you can hold it like this and open your hands. But even though you think you let go, it's still in your hands, right? So by acknowledging it, and acknowledging in its essence, as you are describing it, is recognizing something's existence, right? So we acknowledge it. So by acknowledging it, you put in that extra step of turning your hand around. And now when you let it go, actually you get rid of it. It falls down. And it's an essential step, because, I mean, if I don't acknowledge something's existence, how the hell can I accept it? You can't. And conventional everything, schooling, therapies, everything tells us that the key to everything is accepting it. But that's total nonsense, because there are prior steps to that, like what you just pointed out, that needs to be done first, that makes the whole precious process much less arduous and painstaking.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting. I've got another story where I saw someone else. I won't say who it is, but they had a terrible neighbor, right? That did something awful to them, or that's some big disagreement. And I sort of gave this advice to them and said, look, you've got to the first step to relieving that pain or that frustration or that hatred or whatever you want to call that negative energy. It's almost like an entity in and of itself. It exists inside. It just exists inside your own mind. That's the other thing, right? It only exists there inside your mind.
Exactly.
It's this little ball of black energy, or whatever, dark energy. And so I said, look, the only way that you're gonna have to dissolve that is you can try and forgive, but unless you acknowledge that person, or at least that the person in your mind, you don't even necessarily have to go and acknowledge the person in a physical sense. You just have to acknowledge that energy and that person in your mind as part of that energy to help start that process of getting it to dissolve. Because what happens is, like I said before, for you to be able to do that is you have to humble yourself, like your ego in a sense. Your ego has to become humble, and when your ego becomes humble, it gets out of the way to let that energy dissipate. And it was interesting because when I told this person gave them this advice, they couldn't do it because they've got a huge ego, and I'm not even sure if they understand what the ego is and whether they understand whether they have an ego in the first place. So it was very hard for them to take that advice. So and I don't think it is an easy thing to do, because especially if you're not self-aware and aware of your ego, which is like most of us, right? And the ego is such a funny thing, because the more you think you don't have one, probably the more you have it.
Exactly,
It's very devious.
Yeah. It is. Oh my God! Just this one particular question, we can probably have like a 2-hour interview just about that question itself. This energy, I find it so amazing. The more we think about something, the more we make it exist, quite literally. And the irony is, because it exists in our minds, it is real. And then it creates this binary fights, this inner conflicts, because we think it's real for us. So subconsciously, through our conditioning, we automatically expect the other side of whatever caused this conflict to be able to access our brains wirelessly and to understand this is what they have to do in order to resolve this conflict. It's so complicated. And the whole point is we go, okay, listen, I actually have to do this. And then, because everything is action and reaction, because I changed how I reacted, there will be a different reaction automatically. But yes, like I said, this particular question, we will talk about this again, definitely.
Sounds good.
All right, sir. Ready for the next question?
Sure am. Shoot.
Now, this is one of my personal favorites. Gideon, in your own experience, right, what does it mean to exist?
These are very deep questions. Well, I guess there are different levels of existence. From an obvious perspective, there's the physical existence, and then there's a mental existence, an emotional existence, and perhaps a spiritual existence. But that's debatable, right? Because it's so hard to prove any of that. It's very subjective. We each seem to, I mean, you can talk to a million different people and they have a different answer on probably any of those levels, to be honest. So,
we test that.
Yeah, totally. So I think there's different levels of existence, and I think perhaps the more aware you are of all the different levels, the easier it is for you to navigate your way around this thing called life. Because I mean, it's almost like I guess it's related to life. It's maybe the same question: what is life and consciousness? So. I mean, I don't actually have an answer, to be honest. What is existence from that perspective? What is consciousness, or what is spirit from that perspective? And where does all that stuff come from? Where does it originate from? Is it from an entity called God? Is it from universal spirit? Is it just a figment of our imagination that was created out of evolutionary processes? Does something like heaven and hell exist? What happens to our spirits, if you believe in our spirits, when we die? Do we continue to exist in that sense, or not? I don't have an answer. Or at least my answer is I don't actually know. I would love to know, but it seems like the only way that you can find out some of these questions is to die first, and then you can come back and tell everyone. But as far as I know, the closest we got to that has been people who have claimed to have near-death experiences, or who might have died and then come back in a sense. But then the question is, did they really die? Did they actually really die? How long were they dead for? Was it long enough to truly say what happens to you when you don't exist in the physical realm anymore? So, and it's hard to have a scientific sort of an answer for this. So it really comes down to belief. Then, what is this thing called life or existence? And where does it start, and where does it end, and where does it originate from? It really comes down to a subjective answer, and so it seems to be different for everybody. Or it's interesting. You look at even churches, for example, or different religions. Like let's just take the Christian faith for an example. You could do the same for Muslim faith or any other faith for that matter. There are different denominations. So within the Christian faith, people can't even agree. And then you can drill down even further to say just a church, just one church, and try and see if you can get agreement there. Sure, you'll have a common agreement on some things, but then there's always a disagreement about some finer details. And so that makes it interesting. So I guess it's sort of like a long answer of, I don't actually know. I don't actually know what it actually is. But all I know is that we're here. We are aware. We are conscious. And more recently, I've really been honing in on not just how some people say something like what would you do today if this was your last day on Earth? And that's more granular than looking at your whole life. But it's still not granular enough in my view. I think maybe an even better way is to say, what if this very moment was your last moment ever to be here on Earth? How would you look at that moment? How would you experience that moment? What would go, like what sort of reactions would you have to things around you, to people around you, to yourself, to your own thoughts? If this was your very last moment, this very, very moment, which you can maybe count in a period of, say, 1 to 2 seconds. What if that was your very last moment and there was something that happened that meant you died? It's sort of like, it's like an elixir, because I found thinking that way has certainly made me just automatically more grateful. Just naturally more grateful, and going, wow, what if this really was the last moment that I got to spend with my beautiful wife and beautiful children? Or what if this was the very last moment where I could work on a project that I really enjoy? Or what if this is the very last moment that I could be inspiring someone? Or what if, even on a more selfish level, what if this was the very last moment that I could have a thought? And or have a body, or have my arms? What if this was the very last moment? How would I perceive it then? And it's sort of, like I said, it's a bit of an elixir. It sort of wakes you up, and so you sort of go, well, is it really worth me having a negative attitude and being pessimistic about life? Is it? I might as well choose to not be pessimistic and negative. I might as well be optimistic and positive, and be appreciative of this very, very moment that we have right now. So I guess that's the answer. Is I don't know, but just be grateful and appreciate the very moment that you're in right now. That's the short answer.
That's a very effective short answer. Thank you. I find sometimes the greatest honesty is reflected in those 3 words. I don't know. It has such power, because what it does is it opens up all this space where we can let new information in, literally, by Once again, the letting go part, the previous question, by acknowledging I don't actually know, and then just going, okay, fine, I accept it. I'm not going to try and bullshit my way through this conversation. And because there isn't that need to validate one's own knowledge or existence or presence or whatever it might be, you just let this flood of new information coming in. And in essence, I mean, this is what existence really means. For me personally, anyway, it's like you said, the answer is extremely subjective, but it means to be. It means to exist, quite literally. And then the irony for me listening to you is, what if one experienced this as the last moment? Well, of course, this is the last moment, because the future is only an imagination, literally. The past is only a memory. And because life is linear, I mean, we only perceive life as the next day because of how we go around the sun, our star in our solar system, and the fact that biological bodies, we need rest to recuperate. So all we really have is this continuous last moment. And then it becomes, what do we repeat the most? So if we repeat being angry the most, then we stay angry. If we repeat trying to be different the most, then we learn and we grow. Yeah. Love your
Yeah,
answer. Thank you.
yeah. And I think you also nailed it with how actually, when you think about it, every moment you have is the very last time you'll have that particular moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I guess you could also then there's two levels to it. It's like any moment that you have, that's the only time you're ever going to have it. So you might as well appreciate it for that time. But you can also ask the question, what if there's going to be no more moments in your life? The moments come to an end, if you could call it that, if you could compartmentalize it as much. But like you say, it's an infinite thing, right? It's not, it's not like, it's not digital. It's not, it's analog, it's continuous.
Exactly.
And I think that's why, if it was digital, maybe our minds would be able to sort of get it a bit easier, but because it's analog and infinite, it's like our minds, I think we just, we don't quite get it, and when we think that everything is always going to be the way it is in this very moment, and like it's, of course it's not, it changes from moment to moment.
Well, evolution kind of is the answer to that, quite literally. Things change. Even the Greeks said it. Heraclitus is my favorite Greek philosopher. The only constant in life is change. The crux becomes, I think it's in our DNA, right? To want to know, to want to understand. The way that our neuroplasticity literally is designed is to make connections, to see patterns. And then you bring the ego, you bring, I compare myself to that person. Then you bring, oh my God, I want to be accepted by life, society, my family, my friends. Then, of course, there's this comparison of being and knowledge and information and value and all of these things. And then at the end of the day, we start believing that we have to know in order to be acknowledged by society, which of course is also just something that was created about 200 years in the Industrial Revolution. But yeah, there's more than one thing to consider when it comes to, why am I the way I am, and what do I have to do to change that?
Yeah, for sure.
My kind sir, next question. You ready?
All set.
Gideon, what do you understand as the self?
Okay. That's an interesting one, because I think, again, there's maybe different levels. There's the self as a physical self, right? So a physical being that's recognizable with our eyes and with our senses. And then there is a sense of self, a concept of self that only exists inside our minds. And that's an interesting one. The physical one is kind of, yep, we can agree on it. Like, this thing called touch, or we could use science to sort of kind of prove that we really exist and me and you actually exist, although that can also get tricky sometimes by the sounds of it. You're right. So, but next level difficulty is the concept of self, that construct of the self inside your mind. What is that? What is that? And where does that come from? And is it actually real? That's an interesting question. Is the self, the concept of the self, actually real? So, good. And there was this beautiful book that I read, and I can't remember the exact name. I'm over 40 now, so I'm allowed to forget things, right? But it was along the lines of stepping through the invisible gate, where it's all about. You do this inquiry about who am I, or what is the I, what is it? Who, like, and then it really caught me at the beginning, because I kept on asking, what am I? Who am I? What is this thing called I? And I would try and sort of go back, and like every time go back, but this like it's sort of almost get to a point where I'm going, it's all just happening in my head. I'm just sort of like almost literally hitting the back of my skull every time I try and move back and going, now, okay, who am I? It's like, okay, who asked that question? Is there a level higher than that that asked that question? Okay, well, who then asked that? You try and go back and back and back. And you go to a point where you go, hang on, this is just all a mind game. Because you can ask that question infinitely. And you end up coming in a full circle. Go, oh, okay, I'm back to square one again. Until you step through the gate, where you then realize the I, in that sense, doesn't actually exist. It doesn't exist. It's just a mental construct. It's just a bunch of ideas that are conglomerated together inside your own mind. There's no physical existence of the self in that sense. And then you come to that realization, and you go, well, what the heck? So the concept of me doesn't actually exist other than inside my own head. The physical body of me exists, yes, and there's this thing called life that seems to be living through us. But what is it? And that's where sort of my understanding of it breaks down a bit. Is it God, or is it spirit, or is it universal being, or source, or whatever it is, or the individuation of source coming through us as a personality? Who the heck knows? But it seems to me that this idea of self is something that gets generated, and it's almost like it's a tough one, because again, like, it comes to the question of, is there a spirit that has a blueprint to it, where it says there's a spirit or a spirit who likes to call himself Gideon, or a spirit who likes to call themselves Marcel or Steve or Johnny or whatever it is, and maybe that spirit really does exist, and it's continuous, and regardless of physical life. But that's hard to prove. I don't know a way to prove that. But certainly this concept of self and my preferences in life, and the image even that I have of myself, that's not actually a real thing other than just thoughts. They're just thoughts. So then you step through that gate and you go, oh, okay. Oh, now I get it. Now I see that the concept of I is just a concept. And then you go, okay, well, if it's just a concept, then what am I really? What is this thing we call life really? And then it's sort of there's a little flick in your mind. It's a little realization, and all of a sudden you look at life completely differently. It's very subtle, and it's not like all of a sudden you become a guru or this massively awakened person or whatever. It's just this little tweak, this little switch in your mind that it changes. You go, hang on, okay. Exactly. It's hard to kind of explain. Maybe I'm not awake or aware enough to properly explain it. Maybe you can explain it better. But That's certainly what I mean. That's the way I sort of understand the self, at least at this stage of my in my career, in my life,
Your existence. Yeah.
in my existence. Exactly.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So I call them keys. Okay, translation keys. We come across these small, intricate realizations that's just, it's like Tetris. You know, in Tetris, when like you make the straight line at the bottom and everything falls down.
Mm.
So the translation keys serve the exact same purpose within our memory data bank, our portfolio of acquired information, right? Um, the power they have is to take a large volume of information, recategorize it, and then zip it, literally like a zip file, compresses it. And the more we do that, then the more we allow our minds to actually get more space, which means we can put more information in there, literally. So I find for myself the exact same questions I am asking now, I started asking probably in my teenage years, literally. So this would be maybe the fourth round that I'm
Mm.
going through this sequence. And every single time I do this loop, I compress it, clearer understanding. And this time I just decided, fuck it, excuse my French, but I'll ask the whole world,
Mm.
including Gideon
Good on you.
Shalwick. What you say is beautiful, all right? If we put a spanner into the works, the self only exists because of concepts. And this is just my own personal opinion. Like I, like you, like we, it's intrinsically connected to this belief that we have to have an identity, a personal identity. Very valuable, of course, and necessary in our current existence, this round, because how the hell am I supposed to compare and evaluate my own performance if I can't weigh it up next to somebody else? If we are all, in fact, the same, what's the point of earning money? Literally,
Mm. Mm.
which is where we are in this existence at the moment. I quickly want to ask you another question, right, which just occurred to me, which is something to do with this as well, but in a bit of a broader sense. So we asked the question, what am I? What is the self? I mean, in essence, we are really stardust. When Carl Sagan started talking about the pale blue dots, like the first time I came across that, I was like, wow, quite literally, it just
Mm.
immediately got me. We're made from the same elements as majority of everything else outside of our atmosphere, quite literally. Then we think, okay, let's say objectively we are a pure product of evolutionary processes put together in order to adapt to its environment, which caused a developmental process which led to where we are now. Now, if we look at the trajectory, third time lucky, I mean, any process, it goes and goes and goes until you reach eventually an optimum, right? So I found myself thinking, what if our evolution as a species one day reaches an optimum? Does evolution just stop? What then?
Mm.
I would love to actually hear your thoughts. Is this something you've ever thought about? Like, because in that moment, I like kind of blew my own mind, and I went, "What the hell?" You know? Because what happens then? There is a natural optimum in everything. So does evolution just stop then?
Yeah, good question. I think I have thought about it. Maybe not specifically in this way, but maybe in other ways. Here's another question for you. What if there isn't an optimum? What if the end goal is actually not a goal, but just an infinite process of improvement, or infinite process of change or optimization,
I
and it never
love
ends?
it. Yeah.
So, and is this perhaps like the message from religion, where it talks about how we've been separated from God, essentially, or certainly from the Christian message, and we need a way back to God. Like there's been, we used to maybe before the beginning, there was just source and just one thing. Everything was one.
Yeah.
And then through creation or the physical world, it was separated in a way. And throughout this time, the whole process has been about bringing it together again. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's what evolution is about, and what it's moving towards again is to make that reconnection with source again. That's one way of looking at it. I'm not sure if it's right or wrong.
No right.
But it's like I guess that's the question. Like is like in our physical world, we would like to think that there's an optimal place to end at, but what about if there's not? Could it potentially go on infinitely? And part of the reason why I'm thinking that is because you think about AI coming to the forefront more and more now, and we're getting these algorithms and supercomputers being able to process things really fast, and the growth is exponential, right? It's like the processing power has been doubling every 2 years. It hasn't stopped as far as I know, Moore's law. And so it's kind of like that story of the chessboard, how the chessboard was invented, or parable. I'm not sure if it's a true story, but apparently the story goes along the lines of this peasant man in old China.
Yeah.
You know the story. That sounds. I'm not sure if I'm getting it 100%.
For the sake of our listeners, please go ahead. Yes.
Correct me if I get the details wrong, but he invented this cool game called chess, and thought, okay, let's take it to the emperor and sell it to them. He's a bit of a businessman as well, by the sounds of it. And the emperor loved the game, and he said, okay, cool, I want this game. How much is it? And the clever peasant, of course, said, actually, just if you could just put 1 grain of rice on the first square, and then just 2 on the next one, and 4 on the next one. Just double it, as you go through the board, and then that's all you have to give me. No big deal. And of course, the emperor went, sure. He didn't understand compound interest, but apparently, and this is where I don't know the details, but apparently, once you get to the 64th square, 64 squares on 8 by 8, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
The 64th square on the chessboard, the number of rice grains you'd need would be enough to be as big as something like Mount Everest or something crazy like that. It's huge, like more than all the rice supply in China at the time, at least. And of course, the poor king. You can't see that, and the king couldn't see it, that exponential growth, until halfway through the chessboard. And I think that's what's happening now with AI, is that we've entered the second half of the chessboard now, whereas at the beginning it's like the slow growth, and all of a sudden, boom! It's like that hockey stick thing, hockey stick curve. We're on the second half of the chessboard already, and we have been for a number of years. But now it's just accelerating, and there's no end in sight as far as I can see. So where's it going to end? Where's the optimal level for that? We're talking about the point of singularity, where AI is become. It'll get to a point where we can't tell whether it's AI or not. And we'll.
There's many theories saying we're there already. We just don't know.
Well, you start looking at some of the deep fake kind of videos coming through, and there's even a service where you can just type in some text and it uses a model to create a video for you, and it's pretty damn good. Like you can still see, okay, there's something a bit dodgy about the facial movements or whatever, but give it another 2 or 3 years, and you won't tell the difference. You won't be able to tell the difference. Anyway. So where's that leading? What is that leading to? Is that perhaps God or Source just coming through finally? On its own right, and finally getting optimized, or what is that? And where's that leading? I don't know. I think it's beyond my mind, certainly, where that could lead. So I guess just sort of observe as we go and do the best we can as it comes our way.
Yeah. So, but this is the beauty of it, right? Because in my own experience, what stopped me from going totally batshit crazy over the years, asking all these questions, is applying certain baseline rules. Number one, what I'm thinking can exist if I take it from outside, inside here, outside. All right. So it does exist, but for me within a confined, controlled environment. In order to make that real, the first step is to use one of my senses to self express it into existence. Because now all of a sudden I'm sharing that, which means if someone else acknowledges, identifies, recognizes, accepts it, it means it exists now, right? Quite literally. And then this process continues, and it starts, and then it jumps into that evolutionary wagon and it goes, okay, how can we make this better? And it becomes this search. The irony, of course, is like it leads to destination blindness because we end up chasing rather than enjoying, which many people fall foul to, if I may use that expression. For me, within the context of this whole argument, linguistics has a massive part to play because once we break everything down completely, our true limitations depend on the language we have access to in order to describe anything. And you would know this probably better than most people as well, because our first language and our second and our third language, we think in different pictures, quite literally. So Noam Chomsky, oh my goodness, I don't know if you've ever come across his work. He's an American linguist, one of my favorite people. He's on my list as well. Oh, wow. He goes into where it comes from and how everything is just made up language and this necessity in order to be able to just describe yourself and how everything is just sound, literally. And then you think about how we measure intelligence. Like, you go to some foreign culture, you don't understand their language, and all you hear is sounds. Foreign sounds. What are they saying? They're just making weird sounds. No, you just don't have the translation capacity to understand what those sounds represent. But we have the audacity to point out to it and say, I'm more intelligent than them. People are very, very arrogant.
We got that quite a bit when we emigrated, where people would just assume we were dumb. And one of our friends, they were Asian, and they were sort of in a similar boat. They would often get, stupid foreigner, can't you understand, and they had a really good comeback. Actually, I'm not stupid. I'm just a foreigner, So that's quite a different twist, yeah.
Right, kind sir. Once again, we have run out of time for part 2 of the Be and Become interview series. I thank you kindly. Is there anything else you would like to add to this part of the interview?
No, I don't think so. I think those are enough deep questions for the day to consider. It's Friday afternoon here. It's probably a good time to start, settling down a bit. Exactly. No, I mean, these are great questions, and not many people, not many people talk about it, or can talk about it, or want to talk about it. And I mean, I don't know why always. Maybe it's something genetic, or maybe some people are not capable, or it's different. But I mean, there's not many people that like talking about this sort of topic, or they might, they might lose total interest, or they might even get upset when you talk about these sort of things. And it's really interesting. And it's been interesting, finding people to be able to talk about these sort of things. It's something I've been always interested in, and love talking about and love learning about. And I think it's really helpful. Like, it's almost like when you think about software, it's like the only way you can change the software is if you understand the code, and so this is almost like trying to understand the code of life. And once you get it, you can go, oh, okay, now I can make tweaks. Now I understand how this thing works, the matrix, and make changes so that it's beneficial for both you and everyone else around you.
And this is exactly one of the main reasons I'm doing this. I believe that we all ask these questions, whether it's in isolations and solitudes, or whether in late night drunken conversations, or on our existential journeys through life, sitting at a river thinking, oh, what is all this about? We all ask these questions. Whether we investigate them further is a completely different situation, right? But by taking control and taking that onus and saying, listen, I want to know, this is what threads being a human being together, because it's our proof that doesn't matter how we see everything, we are in this together, because we even ask the exact same bloody questions. So we're not really that different from each other. And just knowing this, I believe, will make life much easier.
I agree. I actually have one final thing to say, and I read about it in a little personal development book called The Magic Story. I'm not sure if you've come across that. It sounds like they don't even know who wrote it, but look
Sounds
it up.
magic.
It's called The Magic Story, and it's a beautiful story about this Van Rensselaer Day, I think it's called, Day or something like that. It's got a weird name, the guy who finds it and sort of talks about it. And he writes about how he found this magic story. It was written in 1642 or something crazy like that. Wow. And one of the things he talks about there is philosophy and the value of philosophy. And he's quite adamant about it, that it actually has no use in the practical world. And he has a point. I think in the practical world of getting things done, there is a danger of philosophizing too much sometimes, and sort of only having your head in the clouds and forgetting about what's happening on the ground. So I think for me, there's a balance to be had. Like if you can have a good understanding of what's happening here in the clouds with philosophy, but also have your feet on the ground with action and living your life, and realizing that there are it's the philosophy is only what's behind reality, but reality is also part of this thing we call life. I think it's two sides to the same coin. You got to bring them together, as opposed to just living in either one or the other. So, and of course we see that so much. We see people who are only in the philosophy side or the spiritual side, and they've lost connection with the real world. And then you get the other extreme, which is more just the materialists, and there's nothing metaphysical for them in the world. And I think you gotta, for me, there's the golden pathway, bringing them together and using philosophy to make your life better in a practical way.
Speaking from experience, that's tough. I was always floating, swimming inside the clouds all my life.
Yeah.
This is something that I consciously had to decide to change over the past 5-6 years of my life, to literally have my head in the clouds and my feet on the ground, quite literally. Yeah. And once again, it's that age-old, there's only thinkers and doers. From birth we get classified into a specific system, and if we never question it, then this is who I am, literally. But you can exist as a thinker and a doer in the same body. Nobody ever said you couldn't. You just never asked the right questions.
It's nothing like having to put food on the table, when you've got, especially when you start growing a family and going, hey, hang on, this philosophy thing is not actually putting meals on the table. You got to, that's what I'm saying. I think you got to use it and do, take real action in life and create. And I mean, I look at this whole life thing as a playground, and it's, you can shape it and play with it and create things and play. It's just this big game that we're playing. Yeah.
I agree. Many people put that forth before. Gideon, thank you so much. We shall continue part 3 of this interview at a later stage.
All right. Thank you so
much. For everybody watching this, guys, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. click on the little bell to get the notifications for this. We would love to hear what you actually think about these conversations. If you would like to participate, go to the About parts in this profile. This is open to everybody, and everybody means you too. Take care.